Welcome to our deep dive. We've got some seriously intriguing stuff to unpack today. You guys send in some excerpts from Cesare Lombroso's After Death What? And let me tell you, this is some mind-boggling stuff. We're talking about phenomena from over a century ago, like way back when people were just starting to wrap their heads around hypnotism, telepathy, all that.
Yeah, and what makes it even more fascinating is that Lombroso wasn't like some casual observer of all this. This
Okay.
guy was a pioneering criminologist. I mean, the guy who practically invented criminal profiling, right? He was a scientist through and through.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But he was also super intrigued by the unexplained. So he brings this really unique perspective to all these accounts, a blend of like scientific rigor, but also a willingness to entertain the unknown.
It's like the Sherlock Holmes of the paranormal world.
Exactly.
And from what I've read, Lombroso, he really didn't shy away from the bizarre. We're talking hypnotism, telepathy, mediums, even people seeing their own doubles.
Oh, yeah. He jumps right into those experiences that kind of defy rational explanation. Right, right.
And I think that's what we're going to try to do in this deep dive.
Exactly.
Kind of navigate through Lombroso's accounts, try to see what might have a scientific explanation, or at least like a plausible one,
Yeah.
and what remains truly inexplicable.
Get ready to have your minds blown, folks, because we're about to enter a world where the line between reality and illusion gets seriously blurry.
For sure.
Like this one case Lombroso documented.
Okay, yeah.
About a young girl. Lost her sight, but could then see, get this, with her nose and earlobe.
It's wild, right?
Right.
And the way he describes it, it's so vivid, you can't just dismiss it. Like, he talks about her shielding her nose and ear whenever anyone pretended to threaten her eyes.
Wow.
And get this, different smells held under her chin,
Yeah.
they actually produced specific facial expressions. So, like, pleasant smells, she'd smile, unpleasant ones, she'd recoil, as if, in disgust.
That's incredible. So it wasn't just sensing with those areas, it was like actual perception, like seeing with your eyes.
This totally challenges, like, everything we think we know about how our brains work, right?
It really does. I mean, it makes you think about how adaptable our brains might be.
Yeah.
Way more than we give them credit for. Like, could our senses, in certain situations, shift locations or manifest in ways we don't expect? I mean, neuroscience today is still trying to figure out just how plastic the brain really is.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, this case, as bizarre as it sounds, it does suggest there's so much we still don't know about how our brains process sensory information.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes you wonder what other hidden potentials we all might have lurking inside us.
Right.
Speaking of hidden potentials, we can't ignore the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
telepathy.
Oh, yeah.
And from what I've gathered, this was a major area of interest for Lombroso.
Absolutely. He documented tons of accounts of what he believed was thought transmission. He even shares a personal story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he describes mentally willing a friend not to visit. And as it turned out, his friend's plans, they changed unexpectedly.
He willed it to happen. Okay, now that's some next level stuff. But this wasn't just Lombroso's personal hunch, right? He also mentions the work of the English Society for Psychical Research.
That's right, yeah. They did experiments on telepathy, under controlled conditions.
Right.
They had people try to, mentally transmit images to someone in another room, and the receiver would try to draw what they were, quote, receiving.
Fascinating.
And the success rate, especially with people under hypnosis, it was statistically significant.
Hypnosis. So maybe these abilities become, more pronounced in altered states of consciousness.
It's definitely a possibility. And then you have the case of Miss Relf, who was studied extensively. She could guess hidden objects, playing cards with accuracy that was way beyond chance. And then there's Julian Okorowitz. He also demonstrated thought transmission between people, and he even observed that things like stimulants, like coffee, could enhance these abilities.
Hold on. So you're telling me my daily dose of caffeine might be tapping into more than just my alertness?
Maybe.
Maybe there's a whole psychic boost happening that I'm not even aware of.
Who knows?
This reminds me of all that research on brainwave synchronization and that potential for subconscious communication.
Right.
Is it possible that what we call telepathy is just like a form of non-verbal communication that science is only starting to figure out?
That's a very interesting thought. Maybe we all have this sixth sense that we're just beginning to explore.
Yeah.
But we're just scratching the surface here. Lombroso's research goes even deeper. We're talking about premonitions.
Ooh, premonitions.
Where people, they seem to glimpse into the future.
Now, this is where it gets really intriguing. I'm especially interested in this case of Dr. C, this brilliant but kind of neurotic scientist who, according to Lombroso, was plagued by premonitions.
Yeah, Dr. C, he foresaw things like a friend not coming to visit, predicted letters and visitors correctly, and even more dramatically, he foresaw the burning of the Como Exposition, a major fire that, actually happened a few months later.
He predicted a major fire,
He did.
and it actually came true.
It did. Lombroso theorized that certain individuals might have this, heightened sensitivity to subtle cues or unconscious information processing, allowing them to pick up on signals that most of us miss.
Maybe, like with telepathy, altered states of consciousness play a role here. Maybe these abilities get amplified during a neurotic episode or even in dreams. It's like a window into a different way of experiencing time when we're only just starting to understand.
It makes you wonder if there are these layers to reality, ones that we're usually completely oblivious to.
Right.
But now, from premonitions, we shift gears into the world of mediums.
Okay.
And Lombroso's journey with this is fascinating. He started out as a skeptic, but his investigations, they led him to some pretty astonishing experiences.
I've read about those seances with Eusapia Palladino, that famous Italian medium Lombroso studied.
Oh, yes?
They sound absolutely wild. Objects moving without being touched, tables levitating, musical instruments playing on their own. It's like something straight out of a movie.
It was quite a spectacle. Lombroso, he documented everything meticulously, trying to rule out any trickery.
So objects flying across the room.
Yeah, and he even talks about curtains billowing, like there was some unseen presence there. He even describes the weight of objects changing as measured by these things called dynamometers.
And what about Palladino herself? What was she like during these seances?
Lombroso noted that she'd often enter this trance-like state, and afterwards she'd be completely drained, sometimes even experiencing vomiting, leg paralysis. It was taking a physical toll on her.
Wow.
Pretty intense.
Okay, so was Palladino a master illusionist? Or was something genuinely unexplainable happening? Even with an open mind, it's hard to wrap my head around a table levitating.
I know. It's one of those things that seems to defy, the laws of physics as we understand them.
It really does.
But Lombroso's work and the work of others who investigated these phenomena, it forces us to at least question our assumptions about what's possible,
Right. All right, so we've got a senses relocating, thoughts being transmitted, premonitions, and levitating tables. What else could possibly top this?
Well, how about encountering your own double, an apparition of yourself, witnessed by others? Lombroso called it the wraith.
Okay, now that's just straight up creepy.
It is unsettling, isn't it? He describes a teacher, Madame Sage, who was seen in 2 places at once by her students.
No way.
Yeah, imagine you're in class and you see your teacher at the blackboard and at her desk at the same time.
I think my brain would short circuit.
Right.
Were there other cases like that?
There were. Lombroso mentions instances of doubles appearing after intense emotional experiences, or sometimes in people with certain neurological conditions. It's like our sense of self being a single person, it can fragment somehow.
So are we talking about a type of out-of-body experience here? Or is this a glitch in how our brains perceive reality?
Those are great questions. They touch on some of the deepest mysteries of consciousness. Could the double be a manifestation of a dissociative state? Or maybe a sign that the brain's reality-constructing mechanisms, they're kind of malfunctioning?
It's like our brains can create their own ghosts.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how much we still don't know about how our minds work.
Right.
From doubles, we move into a classic, haunted houses. This is where Lombroso's scientific approach meets the unexplainable head-on.
Ooh, haunted houses.
One case he investigated involved this family, the Fumero family in Naples. They were tormented by poltergeist activity.
So we're talking breaking objects, furniture moving around, maybe spooky voices.
Oh, it was way more intense than that. Lombroso describes objects being hurled across rooms, furniture overturned, even physical assaults on family members.
Physical assaults. Okay, now this is a whole new level of unsettling.
Yeah, it was truly terrifying for the Fumero family. They tried everything to stop it, even sending the wife away to live somewhere else, thinking she might be the source.
And did that work?
Surprisingly, no. Things actually got worse. The phenomena continued. It even intensified with her gone. And Lombroso was extremely thorough in his investigation, interviewed witnesses, examined the evidence, really trying to rule out any trickery.
So did he find an explanation for all this chaos?
He didn't. In fact, he suggests that the phenomena seemed connected to the presence of a specific individual, but he couldn't pinpoint who or what this entity might be.
An unseen force attached to a person causing havoc wherever they go. That's like straight out of a horror movie.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It really is.
It also raises the question of how much our beliefs or expectations might influence these types of events. Could fear and suggestion actually create a self-fulfilling prophecy of paranormal activity?
So the more we believe in ghosts, the more likely we are to experience them.
It's a possibility worth considering. Our minds are powerful, capable of shaping our perceptions and experiences in ways we might not even realize. But before we get too carried away, healthy skepticism is important in any scientific exploration.
Of course. And Lombroso, despite his open-mindedness, he was definitely aware of the potential for fraud and deception.
So how did he try to separate genuine phenomena from the hoaxes?
Well, whenever possible, he used scientific instruments.
Okay.
Balances, dynamometers, and even early attempts at photographic documentation.
He was trying to get photographic evidence of ghosts.
Well, photography was pretty new back then,
Right.
so the results were often blurry, inconclusive.
Yeah.
But the fact that he even tried, it says a lot about his commitment to finding tangible proof.
Yeah, he really was ahead of his time, trying to apply the scientific method to, the study of the paranormal.
He was a true pioneer in that sense. But it's important for us, as critical thinkers, to remember that scientific understanding is always evolving. What might seem unexplainable today, might have a perfectly rational explanation tomorrow.
We shouldn't jump to supernatural conclusions too quickly. There could be natural forces at work that we haven't figured out yet. Exactly, and that's what makes exploring these topics so exciting. We're always pushing the boundaries of what we know, challenging our understanding of the world.
We've covered some truly incredible phenomena in this first part of our deep dive into Lombroso's after-death what. We've got relocated senses, telepathy, premonitions, levitating tables, doubles, and even haunted houses. It's been quite a ride so far.
It has, and we've only just begun to explore the depths of Lombroso's research.
Last time we left off with haunted houses and that chilling idea of an unseen force, just wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
It's all pretty spooky. But what I find interesting about Lombroso is that he wasn't just collecting ghost stories. He was actually trying to categorize these phenomena, trying to bring some order to the chaos.
Yeah, that's a key aspect of his work. As we go deeper into After Death What, we see him really grappling with how to verify these experiences, how to move beyond just personal stories and find some kind of objective evidence.
So like a true scientist,
Yeah.
he was determined to apply the scientific method to the paranormal. Trying to measure and document these elusive events is like he was a proto-ghostbuster, armed with scientific instruments instead of proton packs.
That's a great analogy. He talks about using scales to measure changes in weight during seances, dynamometers to record the force of unseen hands, and even early photography, trying to capture images of these phenomena.
Photographic evidence of ghosts.
Yeah.
That would be groundbreaking.
Well, photography was in its very early stages back then,
Wow.
so the results were often, blurry or inconclusive. But the fact that he even tried, it speaks volumes about his dedication to finding tangible proof. He even describes using a bell jar, like a sealed glass container, to isolate mediums and objects,
Oh, wow.
trying to rule out any possibility of physical manipulation.
So he was going to great lengths to eliminate any chance of fraud or trickery.
Absolutely.
But what about the phenomena that couldn't be so easily measured or photographed?
Yeah.
Like the thought transmissions, the premonitions we talked about earlier. How do you apply a scientific lens to something so intangible?
Yeah. Those subjective experiences were definitely most challenging to verify. But Lombroso didn't just dismiss them. He looked for patterns, for commonalities among all the different accounts. He was trying to uncover some underlying mechanisms that might be at work.
So did he find any recurring themes or connections?
Well, one fascinating observation was that many of the people exhibiting these extraordinary abilities were what he called neurotics or hysterics.
Okay.
Today, we might say these were people with heightened sensitivities or unusual neurological conditions.
So he was suggesting a possible link between these unusual mental states and what we consider paranormal abilities.
It seems so. He also noted that these abilities often intensified during altered states of consciousness, like during hypnosis or even in dreams.
That's fascinating. It's as if there's this hidden potential within us that can be unlocked or amplified under certain conditions. Maybe we all have a bit of the psychic within us just waiting to emerge.
It's a very intriguing possibility, and one that Lombroso seemed to entertain. He viewed these abilities not as supernatural in the traditional sense, but as extensions of our natural faculties, like latent powers waiting to be awakened.
Okay, that's a pretty radical idea for a scientist of his time. Now, I'm curious about his thoughts on mediums.
Okay.
He seemed to have this, love-hate relationship with them, fascinated by their abilities, but also suspicious of their claims. Like he was walking this tightrope between belief and skepticism.
He definitely was. He was very aware of the potential for fraud in the world of mediums, and he actually devotes a good portion of his book to exposing the tricks and techniques used to deceive people.
So he was like a paranormal detective, debunking fraudulent mediums while also trying to identify the genuine phenomena.
Precisely. He describes how some mediums used hidden assistance, sleight of hand, even elaborate stagecraft, all to create the illusion of supernatural powers. But amidst all that, he also encountered mediums he believed to be genuine.
So what set those mediums apart from the fakers? What convinced Lombroso of their authenticity?
He was especially drawn to what he called physical mediums.
Hmm.
The ones who could seemingly produce physical phenomena like, objects moving, tables levitating, even materialization of spirit forms.
So Eusapia Palladino, the medium we talked about earlier, she fell into that category, the physical mediums.
She did, and Lombroso considered her a prime example. He was impressed by the sheer range and intensity of the phenomena she displayed, and he really put in the effort to try and figure out how she was doing it.
So did he come up with any theories about how these physical mediums were able to pull off these seemingly impossible effects?
He did, and his theories are quite interesting, even if they might sound a bit out there to us today.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
Well, he drew upon the prevailing scientific ideas of his time, things like animal magnetism, psychic force. He even looked at the emerging field of electromagnetism, all in an attempt to explain these occurrences.
Animal magnetism. Now that sounds intriguing. Is that like the idea of a personal energy field that can influence others?
Yeah, that's the basic idea. It was a really popular concept in the 19th century, and Lombroso thought that mediums might possess an especially strong form of this magnetism,
Okay.
allowing them to, manipulate objects or influence people's minds.
So he was suggesting these weren't supernatural powers in the traditional sense, but more of a heightened form of natural energy that some people had.
That's exactly right. He also speculated that mediums might be tapping into a universal psychic force, a kind of unseen energy field that permeates all things. He even compared it to electricity, which was still a pretty new and mysterious force at the time.
It's like he was trying to find a scientific framework to encompass the paranormal, to fit these strange phenomena into the emerging scientific understanding of the natural world.
He was. He really was trying to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown,
Yeah.
using the tools of science to make sense of these bizarre experiences.
Now, as we go further into Lombroso's theories, we encounter one of the most perplexing and controversial parts of his work, his belief in the possibility of communication with the dead.
Yes, this is where things take a very fascinating turn, where Lombroso's scientific approach meets the world of the spiritual.
So he actually believed that the spirits of the deceased could talk to the living through mediums like Eusapia Palladino.
He did. He documented lots of instances of what he interpreted as messages from the deceased. Often they were things like personal details, memories, even predictions, things that the mediums seemingly couldn't have known. He even describes cases where the handwriting of the deceased was replicated through the medium's writing.
Okay, now that's pretty mind-blowing. I can imagine this idea being met with tons of skepticism, even from folks who are open to other paranormal phenomena. Talking to the dead has always been a touchy subject.
Absolutely. The idea of communicating with the dead has always faced resistance from both the scientific community and religious institutions. It challenges our fundamental understanding of life and death.
So how did Lombroso defend this belief? What evidence did he use to support the idea of spirit communication?
This is where his book gets really, really interesting. He delves into detailed accounts of seances, describing the specific information that was conveyed by the alleged spirits, the emotional responses of the people involved, and his own attempts to verify the authenticity of those messages.
So he wasn't looking for just vague pronouncements or emotional appeals. He was applying that same scientific rigor to the realm of spirit communication.
Precisely. He talks about instances where spirits seemingly revealed hidden objects, gave information about past events that were unknown to anyone present, or even made predictions about the future that later came true. He also looked at the content of the messages, checking for consistency with the deceased's personality and knowledge, and he even considered things like telepathy or unconscious cues from the people involved.
So he really tried to eliminate all other possible explanations before concluding that it was truly a spirit communicating.
That was his methodology. He even acknowledged that some mediums might embellish or fabricate messages, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But he insisted that there were genuine cases where the evidence pointed to a source beyond the living.
Even with an open mind, it's really hard to fully grasp this idea of talking with the dead. It just seems so far removed from our everyday reality.
It does.
It makes you think about consciousness, identity, and the nature of existence in a whole new light.
Absolutely. It challenges our most basic assumptions. But Lombroso's work and the work of others who have explored this realm, it compels us to at least consider the possibility that consciousness might not be confined to our physical bodies.
Okay, so let's say, just for the sake of exploring this idea, that we entertain the possibility of spirit communication.
Okay, yeah.
How did Lombroso envision it working? How could a spirit without a body interact with the physical world and communicate with the living? It seems almost impossible.
This is where Lombroso's theories get particularly interesting, maybe even a bit speculative. He drew from various scientific and philosophical ideas to build this model of spirit interaction.
Okay.
And some of his ideas might align with contemporary thinking, while others might seem a little, out there.
I'm all ears. Let's hear what Lombroso had to say about how spirit communication could actually work.
So he suggested that spirits, after death, they retain some form of consciousness and identity,
Okay.
but they exist in a different state of being, maybe something like an ethereal or energetic form. He also thought that they might hold on to some of their memories, their emotions, even desires from their earthly lives.
So they're not just these empty shells floating around, they keep some sense of self.
That seems to be Lombroso's view, yeah. He proposed that spirits might be able to perceive and interact with the physical world, but in a limited way. Perhaps they could influence certain people, like those who are prone to mediumship, or maybe manipulate subtle energies or forces that we don't fully understand.
So it's like they're trying to bridge a gap to make their presence known. And mediums, with their heightened sensitivities, they act as a conduit between these two realms.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. He even compared it to a kind of telegraphic communication, with the spirits sending out signals and the medium receiving and translating them into words or actions.
It's a fascinating analogy. But why would spirits want to communicate with us in the first place? What's their motivation to reach out?
Lombroso believes spirits might have several reasons for connecting with the living. Some might want to comfort their loved ones, to offer proof that they still exist in some form. Others might seek to share knowledge or insights they've gained from their new perspective. And some might even be looking for help or closure on unfinished business from their lives.
So it's a whole spectrum of motivations, just like in the world of the living. Some spirits are benevolent, some are curious, and some might even be, not so friendly. It's like opening a door into the unknown, and you never quite know who or what might step through.
Exactly. And Lombroso stresses the importance of caution and discernment when dealing with the spirit world. He believed that mediums should be carefully vetted, that seances should be done under controlled conditions, and that skepticism and critical thinking are essential tools when navigating this realm.
So maybe grabbing a Ouija board and summoning spirits in your basement isn't the best idea.
Probably not if you're following Lombroso's advice. He believed spirit communication should be approached with respect, an awareness of the potential risks involved, and a healthy dose of skepticism.
This has been such a thought-provoking journey.
It really has.
We've gone from transposed senses to levitating tables to communicating with the dead.
Yeah.
It's like our brains are working overtime trying to wrap our heads around all these ideas.
It's definitely a lot to take in. And Lombroso's book is full of even more astonishing accounts and theories. But before we go any further, maybe we should pause for a moment and try to summarize what we've learned so far.
That's a great idea. Let's take a moment to ground ourselves before we launch into the next phase of our deep dive. We've really gone deep down the rabbit hole with Cesare Lombroso and his investigations into all these extraordinary phenomena. Relocated senses, levitating tables, even communicating with the dead. It's been a wild ride through a world where, the line between reality and illusion gets super blurry.
Yeah.
But with all these accounts, all these theories, I keep coming back to this one big question, What did Lombroso himself truly believe was behind all of it?
Yeah, that's really the heart of the matter, isn't it? Lombroso being a scientist, he was always searching for connections. He wasn't content with just like cataloging the strange. He wanted to figure it out.
So did he come up with some, like, grand unifying theory of the paranormal? A way to make sense of everything?
He did, and it's actually pretty fascinating and even kind of relevant to how we think today.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued.
He basically proposed that the key to all this, the answer to these mysteries, lies in the unconscious mind.
You mean that vast, hidden part of our minds, the part that operates below our everyday awareness?
Exactly. The realm of dreams, instincts, those buried emotions we don't always acknowledge. Lombroso believed that the unconscious mind is incredibly powerful. It has a potential that, under the right circumstances, can manifest in ways that seem, well, unexplainable.
So he's saying that things like telepathy, premonitions, even moving objects with your mind, these aren't like supernatural invasions from outside. They're expressions of our own hidden mental abilities, kind of like superpowers we don't know we have.
That's the core idea. He saw these phenomena as evidence of, like, a deeper reality, a reality that's more interconnected than we usually perceive, where the boundaries between, mind and matter, between ourselves and the world, they can get really fuzzy, maybe even dissolve completely.
It's like we're all connected to this psychic dimension, a realm of thought and energy
Mm.
that shapes our lives in ways we don't even realize.
Right. It's a pretty heady concept, but it has a certain allure to it, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think about those explorations in quantum physics, in consciousness studies,
Yeah.
where they're starting to talk about this interconnectedness of everything.
Exactly.
So Lombroso, the criminologist, the scientist, he was also kind of like a mystic, huh? A
Mhm.
visionary who saw something more beneath the surface of things.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to describe him. He was definitely a complex thinker, someone who bridged that gap between science and spirituality,
Yeah.
always trying to push the boundaries of what we know.
It's pretty inspiring to think that over a century ago, he was already wrestling with these big questions that we're still grappling with today. Now, as we're wrapping up, I'm curious about Lombroso's legacy. How did his work shape paranormal research? What can we learn from his approach to these strange phenomena even today?
Well, Lombroso's work, even though it was controversial back then, it had a huge impact on what we now call parapsychology, the scientific study of paranormal stuff. His efforts to bring a scientific approach to these, often dismissed experiences, it really helped make the field more legitimate. And his documentation, his analysis, that set a whole new standard for research.
So he was a pioneer in bringing rigor and objectivity to a field that was often seen as, full of mystery and superstition.
Absolutely. He stressed controlled experiments using scientific tools, and he really emphasized the importance of critical thinking. He basically laid the foundation for a more systematic, evidence-based approach to studying the paranormal.
But he didn't completely shut out the possibility of something more, right?
Yeah.
He was open to a deeper reality, maybe one that science couldn't fully explain yet.
That's right, and I think that's one of the most important lessons we can take from Lombroso's work, that balance between skepticism and open-mindedness. You have to approach these things with a critical eye, sure, but also with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
He reminds us that the search for understanding, it's an ongoing process, and that sometimes the most incredible discoveries are just waiting for us, just beyond the edges of what we think we know.
I like that. It's about being willing to question, to explore, to acknowledge that there's so much we don't understand.
It's been such a fascinating journey exploring Cesare Lombroso's work, from transposed senses and levitating tables to, the possibility of talking to the dead. We've covered so much ground, explored so many mind-bending concepts.
It's a testament to human curiosity, isn't it? This constant drive to understand the world around us, even the parts that seem impossible.
Exactly. And until our next deep dive, remember to keep those minds open, folks. Who knows what amazing things you might discover. Thanks for joining us.